Hello and welcome to the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuru and it's good to be back with you ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we'll be exploring the power sector, the energy sector, the financing options for it. We need to get a solution on sustainable funding options for the energy sector. That's our discussion tonight, that's all. Before we get into the hard stuff, we'll do a little bit of personal stories. I'll tell you my personal doomsday story. And we'll get into our discussions on how Ghana can get sustainable financing options. And I have a very interesting and astute guest to help me do this. He's no stranger to you and I. He was a former CEO of GNPC, that's a Ghana National Petroleum Corporation. His name, Mr. Alex Mode. We'll be delving into the discussions tonight and we'll try and find out how exactly we can take ourselves out of this problem where we keep on coming back. And there are so many reasons adduced for our problems. One is generation mix, one is this, is that. Let's find possible and permanent solution, particularly on the financing side. My name again, Philip Nanfuru, and my guest, Alex Mode, on tonight's edition of the business edition of PM Express. All right, thanks for staying with us. This is the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuru and my guest, Mr. Alex Mode. Now, before we went into the break, I was telling you about an interesting story I had to share. And it's critical I share this story before I go to Mr. Alex Mode and we get our conversation rolling. In all the discussion of the energy sector and power issues, I was on leave for a number of days. And just before I was resuming, boom, my lights went out. And the anguish and the anger I had, lying down in the heat, waiting desperately for the lights to come back a day before I resume work. It's very, very boring, to say the least. And it keeps on going on and on. No matter how little the time is, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, it's still frustrating. We've been asking for a timetable and nothing has been done about it. We'll hear from the Energy Minister, John Peter Mengu, shortly on what exactly they are doing with regards to getting us some timetable before this load shedding exercise is completed. But I'll cut straight to Mr. Mode and find out from him, what have you been up to since you went out of GNPC? How has it been like being behind the scenes and monitoring and looking at how events are folding out, generally in the economy and in the energy sector particularly?
Personally, for me, it's been great. I've been on cryogenic leave, as I tell people. It's a leave where you put on hold for a while and soon you'll be back. With regards to what's going on, it's very interesting. You know, we heard a lot about what will be done by the current government, and we've seen what they have done.
And if I may ask, what have they done for you?
Well, they don't have a generation problem. I mean, it comes with the discussion of really what is doomsday. And doomsday is when you have the technical issues and the financial issues, and these two worlds collide, and boom, you have doomsday. The technical issues is when you have plants which are not maintained properly over years, and these plants require periodic maintenance, and when that's not done, they sometimes go off on an unplanned manner. Also, you have capacity constraints. When you don't have enough capacity, you have to bring in more generation capacity. On the financial side, you have where you're not able to raise the necessary letters of credit to bring in crude oil or pay, or use your guarantees to pay your fuel consumption from purchase of gas. So you have the financial and you have the technical. When those
the two come together,
these two worlds collide, you have doomsday. We shouldn't have doomsday now, because in 2016 we had enough generation capacity brought in. The NDC government made sure that we got all the car power plants in. There's a second car power plant which was supposed to be delivered immediately after 2017. And also we had Ameri. So we had enough capacity. In fact, we have overcapacity. And for what people don't know, we have so much capacity that we are paying almost $500 million a year for not using the capacity. So the capacity is not a problem. So the problem now is either planning unavailability of free gas which is cheap, and as such now you have to buy expensive gas or buy expensive crude oil, inadequate planning to ensure that that crude oil and those gas are delivered, and mainly because you may not have put in enough financial letters of credit, you've not got enough credit from your banks to be able to raise the necessary letters of credit to bring in the crude oil or pay outstanding payments you haven't paid in the industry. There is a general challenge in the power industry, which is the credibility of the players in the power industry and the creditworthiness of the players in the power industry. And I think we should talk about that.
Okay. Before we get into that, about 2-3 years ago, there was this discussion about the energy sector levies and clearing the debts in the sector. And now we've had a bond issued to take care of these debts and make sure that everybody who has a stake in this power industry, both the banks, those who supply, everybody's taken care of. And there's always this debate as to whether we should have issued a bond on its own or maintained ESLA on its own. If my question is, what's your view on that? Because even though the bond has already been issued and ESLA has been securitized to service that bond, what's your view on that?
I think there are two issues in the power sector, and one of them was there was a lot of outstanding payments in the whole value chain, which includes, payments for fuel from crude oil suppliers and from the gas suppliers. There was also issues with non-payments to the generating capacity or the IPPs for them to ensure that their operations and maintenance is well done. And then you had also the distribution. You have the bulk distribution from Gridco, and you had the domestic distribution or from ECG and from NEDCO in the north. And all of these people had financial constraints. So ESLA was put in place, which was actually financed. Most people don't know this, but ESLA is financed by the petroleum industry. It's not financed by the power industry. Okay. So we are cross-subsidizing the power sector's losses and the lack of payments and the indebtedness in that sector by putting a tax on the fuel you and I pay, buy fuel. We use that to service ESLA.
But is that a prudent thing to do?
Well, that was, I think, the only mechanism at that time to do it, because government needed to raise money. And, government has a very tight ability to raise financing. So they have to look for a free flow of funds from some area. And the easiest way to always put or get a free flow of funds is from taxing fuel. It's something that everybody uses, so it's easy to collect. The credibility behind collecting the money coming from fuel is very low. So you can't actually issue a bond from that. And that is what we did in 2016. We issued some bonds in 2016 to be able to do that. Some other bonds were issued in 2017. I think the only difference was they intended issuing bonds in a tranche basis, whereas in 2017 they decided to issue a very large bond.
A very large amount.
Yes, but either way, it's a prudent way of raising money to service the power sector. What we don't actually know, and there's no real accountability on it, is what have those funds been used for? And I think it's important that the people of Ghana know that they're paying through the fuel levy called, the ESLA levy, to service outstanding debts, and what has the money being used for that? And that is very crucial.
Okay, in this whole discussion of the Energy Sector Levies Act and using proceeds from, like you said, the fuel side to service the debts in the power side, and the discussions came up this term called cash waterfall mechanism. Most people will not understand this. Maybe because you've played in the industry, obviously it will be like this to you. What exactly is a cash waterfall mechanism when it comes to power? Okay, so
this was thought through in 2014, and I was one of the key players who brought this up. And because of my banking background, I had discussed a lot of structures that we can use to ensure that the whole value chain in the power sector starting from fuel supply to actually distribution, become credit worthy back, because the whole sector had lost its creditworthiness. The credibility in the sector had gone. Everybody was owed by somebody who couldn't pay. You know that gas was supplied by Ghana Gas, who bought it from GNPC. None of them have been paid. You also know that we have N-Gas, who supplies us gas from Nigeria. We always have problems paying them. Then we also have the crude oil suppliers. We also have problems paying them. So the idea is their banks, their financial institutions would no longer give credit to supply Ghana. So we have to have a mechanism where the banking industry is very, very conversant with and would support such a system to pay so that we can make sure that when the funds are collected by ECG, what you and I pay for electricity, ECG collects it in one collection account. ECG then hasn't got the right to just decide who he pays. It's a waterfall that says fuel suppliers are paid first, generation is paid second, distribution is paid third, either Gridco and then gas. The industry doesn't like that. However,
why?
The banking industry likes that. Well, people don't like structure. People don't like to be told, to be confined in space what to do. People like the leverage of being able to say, oh, I'll pay this man and I'll not pay that man. It gives them leverage. For some reason, I don't understand it. But what it does is it stifles the whole industry, because the banking sector is very simple. They want to know that the money we've given you, you pay it back to us. They don't want to know that the money we've given you, you've used it, but then you've gone and paid somebody else somewhere who may or may not be relevant to what I gave you the money for. And that brings in the credibility of these institutions. And that is why you have to have very strong institutions. You have to have a strong board. You have to have a strong CEO in all of these institutions, so that when they get those calls, they can say, no, we are not going to pay these people. We are constrained. In fact, by putting in a cash waterfall, it even gives them the chance to tell the people that, oh, I can't pay this guy. You know, the cash waterfall doesn't allow me to take money from it. And that way it gives also creditworthiness and credibility back into the sector, where all the players and their financial institutions now know that when we give you 100 cedis to buy crude oil, we will get 100 cedis back. Not that we will get 60 cedis back, because you have used 40 cedis to pay somebody somewhere for something he did some time ago, which had no relevance to what I gave you the money for. And that is the issue every single finance minister is facing right now. And you would think that, yes, this government will be able to do it easily, but they have not been able to do it.
So Alex, if this cash waterfall mechanism is going to help, then why isn't there any way of ensuring that players in the system, players in the chain, just adhere to it, and then it solves a lot? Because a lot of it's always one of the reasons that is given for more or less like a solution to some of the financial problems we see in the energy sector. I remember, I think the finance minister said, after this bond will be issued, that was somewhere in 2017, after this bond will be issued to take care of the debt, then we'll implement this cash waterfall mechanism, and then it will bring things back. So if it's a good thing, why aren't we just doing it?
Well, first of all, the cash waterfall is stochastically independent from issuing the debt. It has nothing to do with issuing the debt. The cash waterfall just says, when you give me money and I generate power and I collect the money, this is how I will pay you back. What has it got to do with the old debt? What they were doing is they were using the current revenue to pay old debts. So put yourself in a financial institution's situation. I have given you 100 cedis to produce electricity. You now produce electricity, but you say, I'll give you 60. But you know what? I owe somebody last year. I'll give him 40 of that. That is what was being done, and that is what is currently being done. ESLA was supposed to take care of the ring-fenced old debt. The ring-fenced old debt was ring-fenced in 2016.
And then please explain ring-fence for...
Ring-fence means that if we owe in the industry $1 billion, and every month we are producing electricity which is costing us $1 billion, we are not going to use that $1 million that we collect as revenue to pay some of the old debt.
Okay.
So we ring fence the old debt.
Okay.
And then we have a mechanism to say, we are going to take care of this old debt. It has nothing to do with the current thing. So ESLA will take care of that. That is why I said they are stochastically independent. Once you ring fence, you shouldn't have any new debt if you put the waterfall in place. And if the money you are collecting is enough to pay everybody in the value chain. So the next question you should ask PURC is the money that is being billed enough to pay everybody? And the second question you should ask ECG is the money that you are collecting enough to pay the people who you owe in this sector? And the answer to both of them is no. And they will tell you it's yes. I can ask PURC to come here and show us that they are actually billing enough to pay for the power sector. And the question you ask is, why would anybody continue paying or financing this power sector? There's only one reason, and it's called Government of Ghana is backing this. The debt that is being piled up will be paid by Government of Ghana, which is you and me. And that is why the finance sector continues financing this, because it is even better than buying treasury bills. Treasury bills will give them 13%, but if they lend to ECG or they lend to Gridco, they'll be charging them 25%. Now, if you were in the bank, which one would you do? Knowing that the debt from government, whether it's a treasury bill or the debt from government, which is ECG, has almost the same risk. Now, you've done finance. If you have the same risk and there are two prices, which one will you take? You take the higher price.
The higher price.
That is what is happening in the sector.
So, just to break it down a bit, if ECG is going to do all the collections, then based on the waterfall mechanism, ensure that, okay, so this is the line of payments for respective suppliers, etc. ECG, I remember even yesterday's town hall meeting, the Vice President alluded to the fact that ECG has collection shortfalls or collection issues, and there was also this moving us onto prepaid meters to deal with the issue. I have gone to some estates in Ghana here where I've seen them, everybody's changing their meters from the postpaid to the prepaid, and you see ECG or now PDS up and about. The prepaid meter thing, Alex, is it really going to help? Because I've seen people do some illegal stuff, and maybe ECG comes to disconnect, and you hear that an electrician has come to reconnect easily. Is the prepaid meter going to help in ECG's collections?
Well, it definitely should help, but when you are working with a criminal, whether you have prepaid meter or postpaid meter, he's going to steal. So the real question is, how do you know that you have supplied 1 million cedis of electricity to a certain area, and you are supposed to collect 1 million cedis, and the meters are supposed to tell you they have actually supplied 1 million cedis. If you supply 1 million cedis and you have a bulk meter somewhere, that's it, I've given these people 1 million cedis. I have supplied it to them. But when you go and you reconcile with their meters tell you that there's only 800,000 that they received, then there's some 200,000 going somewhere. So immediately, if you're an astute businessman running a company, you will clamp down on that area to find where is my 200,000. But this goes on and goes on and goes on, and nobody in ECG seems to be worried. I don't know what their KPIs are in ECG, what they are actually measured on. I hope that we can institute private sector KPIs into public sector so that there'll
be some level of efficiency.
There has to be a level of efficiency and accountability. Not only efficiency, there has to be accountability. And if you don't do your right thing, you get fired. Everybody has some sort of tenor system in the public sector. People should start waking up, because I don't see how running a government, which is a business, by the way, you will allow one of your organizations to continuously lose, pay bonuses, make sure that the CEO remains in place, because maybe you don't have a KPI that tells him that you have to be efficient. If you have that KPI and you give him a timeline to do it and he's not, he has to have a performance improvement plan or he gets out.
During today's, the National Democratic Congress had a discussion on their sort of, more or less, if you can call it a rebuttal to what happened yesterday with the economic management team. And if I remember correctly, former deputy minister...
You mean what the true situation is?
Yes. If I remember correctly, the former deputy minister of energy, John Jinapo, he was talking about some of these our energy players being in debt, ECG, Gridco, and he was mentioning the projection of these companies are going to take on debt. What's your...
To be fair, you know, these companies have always been in debt for a very long time. Like Tamale Refinery has been in debt since 1996. I mean, they've always been in debt. But the real question is, the mechanisms that have been put in place, have they been used to actually pay down some of this debt? And those are the main issues there, because ESLA was brought in to take care of this problem. Now, ESLA, you have to issue ESLA over a long period. We all know that in Ghana, bond maturity doesn't go that far. So we have to issue them in tranches. And we also have to see, based on the collections and how ESLA is being serviced, whether we can do that. ESLA is actually a government bond. It's just issued through a special purpose vehicle.
Okay. Okay. I want to also move the discussion into the dynamics of there were a lot of jargons thrown about yesterday. Tying in, dualized, switch, and other words. Essentially, the energy minister was explaining a question asked as to what was the current situation. And he was explaining it as there's a change from gas to other types, or there's a cut. I want to put words into his mouth. I want us to play exactly what the energy minister said yesterday.
I'm confused. I'm not
exactly.
Really
and then you listen to him, and then we'll see exactly what he has. So we'll listen to the energy minister and hear exactly what he has to say in answering the question at yesterday's town hall meeting.
Yes, we've directed the various agencies to provide information to areas that would not experience lights being on. Mr. Vice President, it's also important to know that these agencies have their own internal mechanism. For instance, I'm told in Ashanti region, most of these areas have already been informed prior to the shutdown. I'm quite surprised why some of the areas are not receiving those information here in Accra, because I always have it on my notice. They send me a notice that these areas would not, be able to experience a light on. But Mr. Vice President, we still insist, from looking at the participants, the need, we still insist that we intensify, some work so that the people who will be out of light, of course, they will be made to be aware that they will not experience light during the period.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was the Energy Minister, John Peter Mewu. Apologies for that wrong insert, but that was actually him speaking about the timetable we're supposed to get with regards to the power situation. Let's now listen to him on exactly what is causing this problem and how they're planning to solve it.
Why huge install capacity of 4,700 and over, with a peak demand of just about 2,600, yet still we have intermittent shortfall in supply? That's a very brilliant question. Mr. Vice President, our energy mix in this country cuts across hydro, renewable in terms of sun, gas, which is the thermal, and also light crude oil, and also heavy fuel and diesel. In our current tariff that we are paying, the tariff has been driven largely because out of this energy mix, large proportion being priced on gas. If we are going to turn on a plant that is going to be fed on heavy fuel or light crude oil or diesel, that will bring an added cost to the existing tariff regime. Largely about 660 megawatts of our plants relied on gas. So when we shut down the gas plant at Takoradi to make provisions for the tie-in that we are undertaking, it means all these plants that are relying on gas, Ameri, TICO, KTTP, will no longer have access to feed on gas. But what we have done is through the benevolence of the Ministry of Finance, sufficient fund was made available to procure light crude oil, diesel, heavy fuel for plants that relied on both gas and fuel. Some plants are dualized. When the plant is dualized, what it means is that it can feed both on light crude or gas. All these plants that I've mentioned do not have that capacity. They only relied on gas. So the shortfall we are seeing currently, it's as a result of the migration largely from the gas-fired plant to the light crude, heavy fuel, and then also the diesel plant. We have sufficient diesel currently in the stock of Tema Oil Refinery and most of this plant. I want to assure Ghanaians and also all the listeners gathered here, the participants, that first of all, we want to apologize for this intermittent supply, but we are never back to the era where we have consistent, persistent shortfall in supply.
Right, so that was the Energy Minister, John Peter Mewu, at yesterday's town hall meeting of the Economic Management team, explaining to us, the Ghanaian public, what exactly is causing this intermittent power challenge. He says it's a change from gas to heavy fuel oil or light crude oil run machines. So essentially, that switch is causing some problems. Alex?
Well, I was very happy to see my friend Honorable Mewu sweating, trying to explain something which is very simple to explain. When he was on the other side, it was easy to ask the questions. A very easy question that was asked, you know, exactly why are we having these intermittent power shortages? And these are not intermittent power shortages, it's because of bad planning. We knew long ago the schedule of when the tie-in was going to take place. Everybody knew this. It's no news. When you have such a tie-in taking place, you have to make sure that you rebalance your fuel supply. So if some gas are going to go off, you have to make sure that you have other plants. Remember I told you that we have excess capacity to produce. Yeah. That means that you can now use those plants that you are paying for but not using them in the system. So the truth of the matter is we have enough generation capacity if even these plants go out. The problem is they've been relying on cheap gas. You see, the gas we are using right now in the West, coming from Tolo, from Jubilee Field, we don't pay for it. It's called free gas. We negotiated this to ensure that we can have 200 BCF of free gas, which will last us like 7 or 8 years. 200 BCF will last us 7 or 8 years. So okay. Just to put in perspective. So we have this free gas coming, but it's free from who we buy, but you pay the players. So that is why GMPC hasn't been paid, Ghana Gas hasn't been paid, but we are getting electricity, but we are accruing these payments. So because of this cheap, they've been so used to this cheap gas that they've forgotten that when you shut off the cheap gas, you have to bring in expensive gas from N-Gas. To bring in expensive gas from N-Gas, you have to make sure that N-Gas is happy with you in terms of your credit worthiness. That means you've paid some of the old amounts to them so that they give you a new credit line. They didn't do that. Next thing, you have to make sure you have enough crude oil in place to service all the plants that need crude oil. They didn't do that. How do you do that? You have to get financial instruments to finance it. Now, when you have pissed off all your financial institutions, you've not paid them, you've slowed down ESLA, you've used some of the ESLA money that was meant for them for other things, how are you going to raise these letters of credit? That is the current challenge they are having. They are having a bigger challenge than even we had, because right now you have ESLA in place, which is supposed to have taken care of your ring fence debt. You have free gas, which is coming. Now you switched it off. You have to spend electricity. So it's a planning issue. They did not plan for it. Because we knew this in February.
So I believe that's why he said the Ministry of Finance was benevolent in giving them.
What English is that?
Some funds.
It cannot be benevolent. Purchase. The Ministry of Finance owes these people. If the Ministry of Finance had paid, Ghana Gas had paid all these people their money, they will have money to bring in the crude oil. There's no benevolence in this. It's not benevolent. The Ministry of Finance, the government of Ghana, somehow through one sector, one industry or the other, owes these people. So basically, they have just paid them what they owe them. There's no benevolence here.
Okay, so Alex, planning and financial issues, or planning or financial issues? Both. Both of them.
Planning is
are
the first
cause
one
of the current problems.
That means that they were not listening to the technocrats. They were not making sure that they challenged the technocrats to ensure that they knew exactly when the crude oil should come in. The technocrats, I can tell you, would tell them that we need this in by this date. It is your job to now go and get the financial instruments to bring in the crude. You just can't go and buy crude tomorrow and bring it here. It will take you about 6 weeks or so. So if you haven't planned for it, the crude is not loitering around. You just can't, it's not an off-the-shelf thing. You have to order it. You have to be in a program. You have to have a ship come, pick it up, bring it here. They messed up. They did not plan properly. And that is the challenge that they are having right now.
And that's what's causing our current.
And they thought that, oh, if we just ask finance to give us the money, we can bring in the crude oil, or we can pay it end gas. It takes time. When you pay somebody, they have to now go through their chain and release the things to you. It takes time for it to come. So planning was the main cause of their problem. The second cause was they didn't have the financial instruments to do that. And they relied on the Ministry of Finance, who were very tight with IMF.
Yeah. So
they also had to wait for them to get out of IMF to do something. So yes, we are saddled with those problems. They knew when the amount of generation we were going to generate. There was no way they can tell us they couldn't give us a timetable. The only problem is that from time to time, GridCo has some challenges in distributing the electricity. Because when you have too much load in one area, it can trip. You remember one day the whole Ghana went off. There was a trip off. That is because I'm sure GridCo told them that we have to slow down here, but they said push it through. And that's what caused the trip off. It wasn't an error. It was, I'm sure it was an instruction for them to keep it at this load, and the machines just tripped. So we have to plan properly. We have to listen to the technocrats. We have to ensure that we also bring in the finance people to ensure we can do this right. If you think you can just buy crude oil, the crude oil operations people who are supplying crude oil into the country will tell you to take us 6 weeks or 4 weeks to get this in. So if you start planning with them from January, and you know that you need crude oil in place by 1st March, you need to make sure end gas is paid. You have to put all these things in place. So planning is key, 1. And 2, making sure that you have the financial wherewithal to be able to do all of that. Otherwise, you'll be in the situation we are in right now.
Okay, Alex, gas and then the different types of the crude, the heavy fuel oil, HFO they call it, and light crude oil. Where we are right now as a country, our development, which of these is better and which has a better financial ramification, if I can put it like that?
Well, from an environmental point of view, gas is the best.
Gas is the best.
Because it combusts almost to give you very clean and not noxious gas emissions. Then, light crude oil is hardly used in many countries because it's a very precious commodity.
Okay.
Heavy fuel oil is normally used in these engines, but it also has an environmental impact. Heavy fuel oil is far cheaper than light crude oil, maybe about 2/3 the cost, or maybe less than that, depending on the price of crude oil. Gas is also far cheaper than crude oil, maybe about the same 2/3 or just above 2/3 the price of crude oil. So from a financial point of view, yes, we should use gas.
Okay.
From an environmental point of view, yes, we should use gas. But the problem is that we don't have enough gas. And we have a lot of gas in the West. We don't have gas in the East. And gas doesn't give us enough gas. They give us like 50 or 100 million scf a day, which can power maybe 1 or 2 plants. From the West, we have the ENI gas, which should be giving us about 150, 170 right now. And then we have the Jubilee and 10 gas, which goes to Atuabo to be, so that the liquids are extracted. From ENI, they don't extract the liquids onshore. Some of this is extracted offshore, so it's clean gas. When it comes to Atuabo, Atuabo then removes the liquids and then passes the gas back into the pipeline, combines with the ENI gas, and it goes. So totally, that gas, we should have enough gas to power the West, and very soon we should have enough. When they're both at full capacity, we should have enough to pump some into the West Africa gas pipeline back to the east, so that plants like Asogli, and there are 2 or 3 plants that use only gas. Those can benefit from the gas that is produced in the West. So yes, this is generally what we are trying to do. You can also move some of the vessels, some of the generation to the west from the east. And this was the agreement that we will move the car power vessels. There were supposed to be 2 vessels, and then we combined it into 1 vessel. First vessel was 225, second vessel was supposed to be 225. Now they combine it into 1 vessel. That 1 vessel now can be moved to Takrady. But to move it to Takrady, you have to put in the infrastructure to be able to extract the electricity, because maybe the substations are not enough. So the planning has to also take place. We knew this in 2016. The plan was that it was in the handing over notes what they have to do. They were also supposed to do the gas, reverse gas with WAPCO. We started with WAPCO in 2016. It was in the handing over notes. Honorable Mayor knows that it's in the handing over notes. And it's not only is the handing over notes, it tells them exactly what they are supposed to do. It hasn't been done.
Okay.
And that is why we have this problem.
I want you to hold your horses for me. We'll take a quick break right now. When we get back, we'll continue this with Mr. Alex Mode, former CEO of GNPC. My name is Philip Nanfuru. This is the business edition of PM Express. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. Welcome back. This is the business edition of PM Express. Now, just before we went on the break, Alex was explaining to us differences between having your plants in one part of the country and having gas supply in another part of the country. And I'll let him wrap up on that, and we'll look at the way forward with the energy sector, particularly on the financing bits, getting sustainable options and making sure that we don't go back into this financial quagmire. So, Alex, just before we went to the break, you were explaining the movement of plants to where the gas is, from the east to the west. If you can wrap up on that for us.
Yeah, so I mean, the plan, which is the plan we had in 2016, which is the same plan in the handover notes which they are using, is that the car power plant, which was 225 megawatts, was going to be an additional car power plant was going to be brought. We combined it to make 1 power plant, and we said when it comes to Ghana, we will move it to the west. Why? Because we have a lot of gas coming in, and if we have more plants in the west, we will be able to do that. One of the conditions of financing the ENI gas project by the World Bank was that we had to have enough capacity in the west, 1, to be able to take the gas, and if we didn't have enough capacity, we also had to have a pipeline that will move the gas from the west to the east, where we had already plants that can use gas. Some only use gas, but there were some plants that can use gas. This was the plan. Now, the plan was you were supposed to negotiate with WAPCO to be able to do the reverse flow. We were supposed to find the money. It was in GNPC's budget. GNPC was supposed to fund it. It was in the budget approved by Parliament to be able to finance reversing the gas pipeline. It will take some time, but it was in the plan. Maybe within a year it could be done if we agreed on the price with WAPCO, and also we agreed on the engineering and the procurement, which could be a problem in some areas. The second thing was move WAPCO, so move car power plant to the west. To do that, you have to build like a substation to be able to take the electricity from the power plant. Secondly, you also have to build a pipeline for gas to supply the gas to the thing. That was all in the plan. It was supposed to be financed. Now, if you have this in place, you can raise the financing from the bank. So it's not that GNPC was going to use the money from the crude oil to do that. GNPC was going to raise money to assist Ghana Gas to do these projects, because Ghana Gas balance sheet will not be allowed it to be able to raise financing because it is indebted 750 million. Nobody's going to lend to you when you're indebted 750 million and you don't know how you're going to, you know where you're going to pay it from, who's going to pay you, when the money is going to come. So GNPC was supposed to stand in, and that was one of the reasons why GNPC was made the parent of Ghana Gas, to be able to stand in and so that Ghana Gas stop falling on government of Ghana each time. GNPC then is the largest supplier of fuel into the power sector. One day somebody asked me, why is GNPC in power? And I said, yeah, GNPC is in power because we're supplying fuel. You know your bill, your electricity bill you pay. The generators, about 50% of the generators' bill to, what's it called, ECG, is fuel. So GNPC is actually or the suppliers of gas are actually one of the largest components in your fuel, in your electricity bill. To ensure that when we supply gas to the power sector, we get paid, it is incumbent on GNPC to make sure that this power sector is creditworthy and strong. So GNPC went in and assisted ECG to bring the car power plant, one, because we're supplying gas to it. We backed them with guarantees. And we did a lot of things to do that. And we're supposed to also help them with the flow, because it's in GNPC's mandate by law to assist in the evacuation of gas. That is why GNPC supports Ghana Gas for all its infrastructure. That's why GNPC supports the power sector to ensure that they can take the gas. This support is not a free support. They will pay us back. But we are sort of giving them what we call a credit derivative. We are supporting them to do this work because their parent, government of Ghana, is not creditworthy enough to support them. But GNPC, because GNPC has direct flows from the PRMA, which is the flows from oil, we can use this to support the sector, and that's not burden government of Ghana directly.
Okay, so just two questions as we draw down on this discussion. First one, way forward for the energy sector, particularly in the financing bit. Is PDS really going to change things? Two, GNPC post Alex Mode. What do you make of this? The first one, and then the second one is GNPC beyond you. What do you make of happenings now?
I hope we don't have enough time for the second one.
We don't.
Well, so the first one is very simple. Energy is a financial play. Okay, if you want to be in the energy industry, you have to ensure that you have your financial institutions that are backing you. That is absolutely important. To do that, it means that you have to get your shop in shape. You have to make sure that your balance sheet is good, and also your income statement is good. That means that you are making profit. Otherwise, they're not going to support you, and they will need some sort of guarantee from your parents, which is government of Ghana. That currency, government of Ghana doesn't have to be guaranteeing everybody. It affects their borrowing, it affects their Euro bonds, it affects all of these things. So Ghana government doesn't have guarantees to be guaranteeing. Ghana government should wake up, because it's running a business and it has these corporations, ECG, GNPC, Ghana Gas. All of these corporations should be firing on all cylinders. They should be efficient, lean machines, not just putting a lot of people there who have no competence to do the work. They have to make sure that they have the right people there, they have the right strategy, they have the right organization, they have the right board, and they have the right management team to make these things work. This makes financial institutions very happy that you have people who can run the sector, people who understand that they cannot, miss payments, they cannot renege on agreements, which is normal in the public sector, even in government. They don't pay road contractors, they don't pay fuel bill subsidies, all of that. And all of these has to stop. So we have to make sure that we have an astute financial management in all of these areas. And we stop the politics in these areas and let these organizations run like high-performing businesses. That is the only way.
And then finally, in 2 minutes, I'm sure you've been monitoring goings-on at GNPC, no doubt. GNPC post Alex Mode. What do you make of it? Because some of the issues about expenditure, and it keeps on coming on and on and on and on. So beyond you, what do you make of the current management of GNPC in 2 minutes?
The time would finish.
2 minutes.
I think KK is doing a good job. I think he needs more support from his board. I think they need to take the politics out of GNPC. There's too much politics going on in most of the organizations, where you have really good technical people sidelined just because they don't wear the right colors. It doesn't happen in GNPC alone, it happens in every single industry. I'm hoping nobody can say that about me. It never happened in my time, I hope so.
You were tough against the politics?
I was just saying that I need good people to work with. I need a good board, I need good management team. You have to have good people to work with. It helps if they're on your colors, but hey, you have to have good people to do the work, and you have to put your best team forward, and you have to take business decisions.
Okay.
This is a business we're running. You know, GNPC is a huge organization. It's running a business. Ghana Gas is a huge organization. Tamale Refinery, a huge organization. You should run them as efficient businesses,
okay,
and leave the politics out.
Okay. So that's from Alex Mode. He's the former CEO of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC. And tonight we've been sharing a lot of discussions, a lot of thoughts, and it's been very, very enlightening, I must say. It's just like a light bulb has just gone on in my head. I hope your lights are on, literally speaking. And this brings us to the end of the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuru, and my guest again, Mr. Alex Mode, former CEO of GNPC. Have a good evening.